colorblind, yeah. All I know is we're here, they took us somewhere. So what they say we're falling out of line. They don't know the two of us are colorblind. All I know is we're here, they took us somewhere. So what they say we're falling out of line. They don't know the two of us are colorblind, yeah. Colorblind for all my life, and they kept painting rainbows. I'm colorblind, it's black and white. It seems it will remain. And you've been colorblind for all your life. Too scared to even say so. We're colorblind, it's black and white. It seems it will remain so. Colorblind, yeah. All I know is we're here, that they took us somewhere. So what they say we're falling out of line. They don't know the two of us are colorblind. All I know is we're here, that they took us somewhere. So what they say we're falling out of line. They don't know the two of us are colorblind, yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, Trend.
Hey,
everybody.
Trinsic
Uh,
is that
Trinsic
one guy
guy.
who
Got
shows
here
up on
lies. Triska got to the party early.
I also arrive to parties early and on time, and I feel terrible every time I do it. I
time. I don't think I've
get
ever
a
been in
friend-
one like on time. Every time I show up, it's like half an hour or like 15 minutes after the fact.
My rule of thumb is always arriving an hour early. Or
An
late,
hour
at,
early?
an hour late at the earliest.
Oh.
No, I have a
If-
friend who like arrives like 45 minutes early to every party. It's like insane. Like he just sits outside in his car waiting 'cause he knows it's too early.
That's so weird.
Oh, see, I at least drive around the block a few times.
Yeah,
until
yeah.
it's fashionably late.
No, an hour late at the earliest, not an hour early.
Yeah, that was what I thought. I was like, why the fuck would you show up an hour
There you go,
early?
Corrupt. There you go.
Words are
Because
hard.
we're very punctual.
Yeah,
Someone showed up an hour earlier. I'm like, all right, you're helping to set up because I'm not ready.
yeah. At
I
that
heard-
point, yeah, you signed up for that. Yes, I agree.
I heard one of the other kids say that you were going to be partying from dawn until dusk. Or from dusk until dawn. It's dusk. We're here.
Oh yeah, this is episode 45. I have it numbered wrong in the doc. in the Google Doc.
45.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. I was trying to decide whether it was my mistake or Trev's mistake. It
God
was
damn
mine.
it, Rory. This- You obviously didn't get the script.
So, hello everyone, Corrupt and Trinsic and Ella, and welcome. Today is a very special episode of Streamers Become Human, not just because it's the 45th episode, but because we have the honor of having our good friend and a streamer who I really enjoy, Tarvis79, better known amongst us as Travis. You can get a link to his channel with the !current guest, but he does a lot of immersive sim content. He does a lot of horror game content, and he is particularly focused on completionism, and he likes to play games that he is particularly knowledgeable on. So, Roy, what happened to yesterday's stream? I'm curious. Nothing happened. I do not stream on Tuesdays anymore. They, so it was canceled, but only insofar as all Tuesday streams are canceled forever. They
Until further notice.
Is the can tiny, or does Travis have large hands? Is a better first question than I had planned. So I'm assuming it's a tiny can.
It is a tiny can. It's a mini. It's only 7.5 ounces.
I was just gonna say, it looks like a mini can.
Is it a Coke Zero? It looks like a Coke Zero.
Close. It's a Pepsi Zero sugar.
Okay. See, I enjoy
Wow.
this. May be controversial, but I like Pepsi more than Coke.
Rory,
Pepsi
shouldn't-
always wins the blind taste challenge.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Really? You
agree.
also know that it was a Pepsi, considering Newfoundland's like stance on Coke.
Yeah.
You should see Newfoundland's
Newfoundland- wait,
stance on
Newfoundland-
zero sugar.
Newfoundland has a stance on Coke.
Actually, yes. Newfoundland is the only Canadian province that prefers Pepsi over Coke, because Newfoundland had a Pepsi plant, which gave a lot of people jobs, and that hit one generation of societal preference, and then it just was passed down to further generations who just preferred it because that's the thing you prefer. If you're from
They did one for the island, and they're like, all right, we see you. We're out here.
Dishonored hands. Yeah. Ooh, Ideal Cynic. Welcome to the stream. This is one of your viewers, Travis? I assume.
Yes, it is. Hey, Cindy.
Oh,
how you
yeah,
doing?
that'd be really awkward. He was like, I
Yeah.
have no idea who this person is.
Yeah. Well, you've made a good Dishonored reference because both me and Travis are huge fans of the series.
I was a fan of what I played the first 20 minutes, but yeah.
Yeah. Trev is a bit into the prologue mission. So Travis, there's a lot to cover with you, a couple different angles. So before we get into stuff like immersive sims specifically, I'm curious about your history with PC gaming. When did you start with PC gaming, and did you start into immersive sims like Ultima right away, or did it take some time?
Well, as I'm fond of saying, I'm kind of the old man around these parts, so I've probably been PC gaming longer than most of the viewers were alive. But we got our very first PC in my house in 1998. I was 13 years old that year, and we actually got it because my dad had tried Quake at one of his friends' houses, and he really, really wanted to buy Quake and play it. So he bought a PC for us so he could play Quake, but it really, really quickly became more the property of me and my brother. I didn't really discover immersive sims until my very first one I played, I want to say 2001. I was a sophomore in high school, and that was when I played the demo of Thief 2. It was a demo mission called The Unwelcome Guest, and it was on one of those demo discs that PC Gamer magazine used to ship out. And I was hooked from that moment forward. I had never experienced anything quite like it, and frankly never would since. To this day, Thief is my all-time favorite video game.
So you started with Thief 2. You started with the demo for Thief 2.
Yes, I did.
And then how did you start working on the back? So by that point, Ultima Underworld is out, System Shock is out, Thief 1 of course, and Thief Gold are both out. What did you just start working backwards on the Thief series to start with?
Yeah, I actually have not played any of the Ultima games until the past year or two. I went on a real retro kick because Ultima Zero / Akalabeth is available for free on GOG. You can just download it and play it without paying anything. So I thought that would be a fun experiment, because by then I kind of knew about the lineage and what those games led to. But when I was starting out just playing games for fun, after the demo of Thief 2, I thought it made sense to start at the beginning. So I went and picked up a copy of Thief the Dark Project, played through that, absolutely loved it. Played a bunch of fan missions, just played it over and over and over again. Did the same with Thief 2. I had to already by the year 2002, 2003, it was actually pretty hard to find copies of Thief Gold. I had to pay like $100 to get a disc of one on eBay, but I did because I loved it so much. And then, it was that kind of that trio, I guess, the trifecta of immersive sim games that came out in the late 90s and the year 2000, between the two Thief games and System Shock 2 and the original Deus Ex. Like, those, no surprise, comprise probably my 3 favorite games of all time. And it was just kind of right at the time I was beginning to play PC games in earnest, and I love all 3 of them. Still do.
Excellent choices, all 3. I've never finished the original Deus Ex. I need to go back to that one and play the full span of the way through. Now, one of the things I wasn't expecting to ask this because I didn't know if you had ever played it, but you mentioned that your father had purchased the PC to play Quake. Did you play any of the old school like arena shooters from the 90s at all? Did you dabble in those?
I did. We played, and when I say we started in '98, that was when my family owned a PC. When I was 8 years old, I went across the street to my buddy's house because he had Doom on. I want to say it was like an Apple II. It was 1993, 1994 when it first came out. But I was under 10 years old then, and that was really, really not allowed. So I had to sneak over there, and my folks couldn't know that I was going over there to play Doom. But I had played a lot of those really, really old retro shooters, and in high school, the one that I was really, really into, that I played with my buddies a lot, ignoring homework, drinking a bunch of Mountain Dew, eating Doritos, pretty stereotypical high school gamer nerd stuff.
The gamer fuel.
Stayed up till 5 a.m. playing Unreal Tournament, the original. Yes. That was the big arena shooter that I was into. And
that was my favorite too. Yeah.
That was back when I had the reflexes to actually play arena shooters, which I don't anymore. I can still outsmart bots, and I can play against the computer, but I can't play a multiplayer shooter against these days.
Those were amazing. Yeah, I also got super into Unreal Tournament. I'm curious about this. Like, once you play immersive sims and once you get used to games with that design philosophy, actually, just to contextualize for the viewers, could I get what are your essential properties of immersive sim? If you had to boil down the definition for the viewers, what would you say is the key criteria?
That's always the question, isn't it? I think emergent gameplay is a really big one. I think, for me, one of the biggest dividing lines is, it's something that we've actually talked about in your stream a lot, Rory, particularly in the context of the newest Thief game, the one that came out in 2014. For me, it's emergent gameplay. There's one sort of design philosophy where the developers know exactly what you're going to do, like a rail shooter, or even, I kind of noticed it several months ago when I played through the first Half-Life, there are little side areas and there's some exploring that you can do, but the systems, the mechanics can be fun. It's not a knock against them to say that they don't give you freedom, but the mechanics are very constrained. There's a set of particular things that you do, and that's just what you do, and the developers know that's what you're going to do before they put the game out for sale. I think for me, the biggest and most important property of an immersive sim is that, in contrast to that, the developers just kind of build this toolkit and this environment, and then they just turn you loose. And one of the most defining properties of an immersive sim is this idea that you're basically free to use these tools in any variety of ways that the devs may or may not have thought of, and you can get these emergent situations that are not scripted and that were not planned. And I think most key element for me, and it can exist in a lot of different gameplay contexts. It can be in the form of a shooter, it can be in the form of an RPG, it can be in the form of a stealth game, but it's this idea that every player is going to have a different experience, and different situations are going to pop up based on how those tools are used and what the player can come up with. And I think that player of an immersive sim should be able to surprise even the devs with what they're able to accomplish inside the universe that's built.
I would say that too, because like when you say immersive sim players should be able to surprise the devs. So I can't remember the entire story about it, but I don't know if you've heard. Rory could definitely tell this story. But the story about how they basically beat the game before getting to even like the beginning of the game for Dishonored.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The
I don't think I know this story.
It was so me and Morgan watched the documentary. There's a no-clip documentary on Arcane Studios, which goes into their canceled Half-Life project and stuff like that. Like it's perfect. It's an amazing documentary. We had a blast watching it. But they described how one of the players kills Dowd before the game, like at the very beginning of the game. Like he finds a way to blink over to where Dowd is. Like, or to like somehow abuse. It's not a blink, I think, as so much as it's an abuse of momentum, and gets over to where Dowd is and kills him, and the game fades to black. Like it's interesting because the game recognizes it as an end condition, even though they didn't intend for you to be able to kill Dowd that early. So since the Empress is alive and Dowd is dead, somehow that combination in the logic was like, okay, game's over now, and I thought that was so amazing. It's the perfect example of what you just said, right? It's the surprise. And I guess I'm curious on like kind of like I don't know, this might be a bit of a cynical note, but like for me, once you've played an RPG that's immersive sim style, like maybe you play something like Vampire the Masquerade or something, and once you play like a stealth game that's immersive sim, do you ever feel kind of spoiled? Because I feel like sometimes then when I go to stealth games that aren't immersive sim, I feel a bit disappointed with the mechanical depth of the game. Do you find the same thing when you try to play other sorts of games?
Oh, I definitely do. The lack of freedom really, when you get used to that kind of player freedom, the lack of it can really chafe. The 2014 Thief game is a great example. If it wasn't saddled with that Thief title and all the expectations of the series, I think I probably would have liked it a lot better if I had just come to it on its own terms as a stealth game. But I couldn't handle it. I hated that, and the reasons that they did it were very, you get conflicting reports on why it was designed the way it was, but the biggest constraint was they wanted to really animate absolutely every action with motion capture. And so if you watch the animations, they're gorgeous. I think it's a beautiful game, at least in terms of the animations, but it really constrains you because if every action is animated, then you literally cannot perform any action that the devs didn't plan for you to be able to perform. And so it totally breaks that ethos of freedom that existed in the first few Thief games. And similarly, I find it difficult sometimes, not always, it depends on the context, and there are some games that do it for me regardless, but if I try to play a game where that freedom doesn't exist, I usually don't have the patience to get through it. And I've been really, really slow. I'll probably create a little controversy here, but I've been pretty slow playing through the Final Fantasy VII Remake because there's a lot about it that I really, really love. I mean, there's the whole childhood nostalgia aspect for me. I haven't finished my first playthrough yet, but I love seeing like the updated graphics, and I think that the mechanics are really, really awesome, but it all just feels so linear and constrained compared to, another game that I've come back to recently, Skyrim. Like, I start to miss that freedom and that emergent quality whenever I'm playing a game that doesn't have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's probably another side to that coin that, like, I wonder if other people would feel the same if they picked up Thief. Like, about they like the constraint. you know, they like the definitive purpose. You know what I mean? And I wonder if they would feel the same way, because I had a number of friends who played like Skyrim or tried some other sort of game with more emergent qualities, and the thing they said was like there's so much to do that they felt like they had no direction, which I think is like, that's very much, I feel like a lot of modern game design practices have tuned people to feel that way, because like in terms of direction, like to me Skyrim has a lot of direction if you compare it to Morrowind.
Exactly.
or Daggerfall, right? Like to me, it's like that. To me, that's cranked up direction. But I think that relative to a lot of the games that are out now, Skyrim even, and I like that you use it because it's a good example. Like I feel like it relative to that's considered lack of direction now. How do you feel about games now being more not just like specific on the mechanics, which I've just asked you about, but like I guess. I want to say a non-judgmental word for hand-holding, but I don't know what the word, in like a total judgment-free way, the extra guidance that developers provide you when you pick up a game, the tutorials and stuff like that. How do you feel about that game design philosophy?
I guess I don't really mind hand-holding, and at least in the context we're talking about it in, and I'll give you an example of what I mean. Morrowind was a really like transcendent gaming experience for me the very first time I played it. It's one of my favorites of all time, and it was wonderful. But it's easy to forget because now I know 30 different ways to break that game in the first hour of playing it. But I remember the very first time I went in completely blind, knowing nothing about the mechanics when it first came out my junior year of high school. And I mean, I got murdered by the first mud crab like a dozen times in a row. And everybody did. And the game was just so difficult and so dense, and I wouldn't try Daggerfall until I was in law school, so Morrowind is kind of my go-to example. But I always, the way I put it is, it used to be that games would ship with 50, depending on how complicated they were. I think Morrowind's was about 50 pages long. I remember Baldur's Gate had like a 200-page instruction manual, and you actually had to read those fucking things if you wanted to know how to play.
Especially Baldur's Gate.
And that's and that's not true now, and I think that's probably a good thing, because the other thing that tends to get lost, I think, is back when I was in middle school and high school and I was playing these really, really complex earlier games with 200-page instruction manuals. I mean, gaming was still really, really, really niche. It really kind of separated me from my peers in less than positive way to be known as someone who was really into video games. And so I think that by and large, I would say that as the medium has become less dense and more accessible and more user-friendly, that's been a really, really good thing, because now nobody bats an eye if you tell them you're really into video games, and that hasn't been true my entire life. I remember when it wasn't.
No, I agree 100%. I think that accessibility, because there is still games like, like those old games that are less guidance heavy, but I think, the accessibility has been hugely beneficial. I'm curious for Melly and Trev and Morgan, if any of you have gaming experiences where you felt like the way Travis felt playing Morrowind for the first time, like getting killed by the same, like the mud crab is quite a, no offense, Travis, is quite a pathetic enemy in the context of the Elder Scrolls. And so was there a game for any of you where you felt like equally lost?
Well, as you know, I'm the best at every game I play, so I don't think I could answer that question.
Yeah, Trev doesn't count.
I feel like I'm experiencing a little bit of that right now with the Doom Eternal, just because like it's like Doom 2016, but just more of everything, and so I feel like I can't get my feet under me. So it's like, and then like just struggling through the tutorial a little bit. I was like, if I'm struggling with a tutorial on this difficulty, I might have to adjust what's going on.
What are you playing it on? What difficulty?
Ultra Violence.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay,
So-
all right. You're not messing around.
But then I'm like, maybe I should bump it down. I don't know. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. But it's just, but I'm kind of like the same thing. It's like like a mud crab. Like, I'm like, this is the tutorial. Why am I having issues with the tutorial? But I'm enjoying it. It's just, but, it's just like that initial, getting into it.
I think my favorite thing the other night was just hearing you sing about it. That was
Oh, did
pretty
you
good.
hear that?
Yes, I did. It was great.
I'm doing
Like
this new
singing
thing where
about it.
I sing my thoughts about the song, about the game.
Hi, Ice.
That's a whole on Daryl.
I'm not positive if I really have an experience like that. I mean, the one experience that I have that I'm embarrassed about is that, so when it first came out, I got Sekiro because the collector's edition was $89, and I love collector's editions. And I was like, this is a good collector's edition. It comes with a statue and a steelbook and an art book and a few other cool things for $89, and it looks like a pretty cool game. So I guess I'll get it. And I tried to play it, and I was like getting killed by the first enemy, and I was like, holy hell, what is going on? And I texted my brother, and I was like, hey, how are you liking Sekiro? And he's like, oh yeah, because I think I said I just started, and he goes, I mean, I like it a lot. I'm surprised you even got it. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I mean, I just wasn't expecting you to get a game like Dark Souls. And I was like, a game like what? And I forgot that it was by From Software until after I bought it. And I was like, I would have never bought this if I knew it was by From Software. And so it was hilarious because I can remember watching E3 last year with one of my coworkers, and we were at work, we had it up on the iPad for people to come in and look at while it was going, and the store was empty. And I can remember watching I think it was the Xbox conference, and it started coming up with this really cool looking game that was by George R.R. Martin, and I was like, oh, this looks so cool. It's Elden Ring. And then I saw that it was From Software, and I was like, never mind.
It's like, this one I'll be watching.
That might be mine. I do remember at one point, the first time I ever played Persona, and this was Persona 5. Persona 5 non-royal, so it was vanilla. The first time I played it, so it was right when it came out, I did have to bump down the difficulty because I got really frustrated with myself, and usually I don't do that either. Hi, Walt.
What's happening?
I can remember getting so angry because
Hey, Walt.
For those of you who haven't played Persona 5, it's such a good game, and I will always recommend it, not because I have over 600 hours into it, but I do recommend it just because it is a really good game, even for people that aren't necessarily into JRPGs. I knew so many people that tried it just because they heard people talking about it and they thought it looked really cool. It just doesn't recommend the platinum for Persona 5 vanilla. Maybe not, but I actually have seen that the Persona 5 Royal plat is actually a lot easier, so go for that.
I'm hoping to get that one, actually. The Persona 5 Royal one.
But so the first time that I played it, some people find that it's really a little bit slow in the beginning. Kamoshida's palace is really slow in the beginning, and I don't know why, but it just feels different in terms of the way that all of the other palaces kind of feel. And I don't know if it's just because it's the first one, but it's just a bit weird. And at one point, and they actually fixed this in Royal, and at the same time, I don't know if it needed fixing exactly. It was just that it got me, and I was upset about it. So the first time I played it, you can ambush enemies, and I was having a tiny bit of a hard time with it. And I was in this one part of the palace, and I was like, oh, I wonder if there's because I always explore, I do loot stuff all the time, and I want to make sure to get everything in a dungeon if I can. And I walked one place, and there was this elevator, and I was like, oh, an elevator, I can go down this. And so I clicked on it, but the thing is that in I don't know if they changed it in Persona 5 Royal or not. I don't think they did, but in the first Persona 5 at least, when you talk to somebody, or you have it's not even a cutscene, but it's just you use an action command, you can't turn the camera. Like, there's a lot of games that do that now, or even when you're in like a conversation with somebody, you can at least turn the camera around while you're talking to them, and you can't do that in Persona 5. And so I was looking at a wall on accident, and I clicked on the elevator, and I didn't see an enemy pop out and hit me and ambush me, and it killed me. And I went backwards because I hadn't saved in like an hour and a half. And I was like, I can't do this. So I lowered the difficulty. I was so sad.
Fair play, honestly. Like,
That sounds
that
like
could be-
Skyrim auto-saving. It's like, oh, when's the last time you saved? Before you started this dungeon that took you 45
Oh, that can
minutes?
be demoralizing.
Alright, well.
Spore is the same way. Morgan has seen me when Spore crashes, and I forgot to save,
He
and
was
it's real
here.
sad.
He was sitting in this chair.
my equivalent to Travis's Morrowind experience, where it was just like I was just totally overtaken by the game, is actually Morrowind. Same
Was it
thing.
the same mud crab?
It wasn't the mud crab. I had started, because you can very early find the Morag Tong in Morrowind, which are like the equivalent, the closest. If you played Skyrim, the closest thing is the Dark Brotherhood. And like I just remember going on that quest and just being totally like I'm amazed and in awe, but also very under equipped and underprepared. But also anybody who's played the original XCOM, like XCOM UFO Defense,
My
you
lord.
can. That is like, yeah, like the second you start that game and there's nothing to help you. You're all alone in the most unforgiving world imaginable. Like the new XCOM, like, to be honest, it's so much better, like, for people, because like you can pick up, it can be your first XCOM game, XCOM Enemy Unknown, you play it and have a great time. Like UFO Defense, good luck.
I like how two people in our chat say kind of the same exact thing there. Like, I can remember one of our other friends, Decker, was playing this game on stream one time, and he had it was like a 98% chance to hit, and the guy missed.
Yeah.
I'd be upset if it was like
Just
98. I'm
loud.
like, are you fucking kidding me?
Can you
Yeah.
imagine? Oh my god.
Firaxis has they do some funny business with the stats on those hits, actually. Yeah, it's
So I kind of wanted to expand on what you guys were talking about earlier, and that was when Tarvis was saying that like he liked the openness of not being like kind of like weighed down by like, oh, you have to do this, this, and this. Is
Like
that
linear
just you don't like the like linear progression of like most games, or is it just like you like the freedom to have your own progression as opposed to having a linear one that like, you have to follow at every single like waking time you're playing?
I don't. When I talk about freedom, I'm talking more in terms of mechanics than I am the narrative of the game or the objectives. Like, I don't really mind playing a game where the goal is, accomplish XYZ and you're done. Actually, to back to one of my perennial examples, Thief isn't a game with complex objectives. It has a discrete set of about a dozen missions with just a few things that you need to steal without killing anybody, and then you beat the level. So when I talk about openness, I'm not necessarily talking about, although I appreciate open world games, that's not really what I'm getting at. I don't need to have this big world where I'm not being guided toward a particular objective. More what I mean is, once you tell me this is what you need to do, I like to have the freedom to accomplish it in different ways. Like, a good example, actually, Trev, would be from your stream yesterday, when you were just so fucking furious at Astral Chain when it forced you into that crummy stealth section.
Yeah.
Because in the kind of games I like, you would have had the option to sneak by. You would have had the option to just go in there and kick everything's ass. And maybe it's an extra hard fight, and so it would be easier if you decided you wanted to do the stealth, but the game wouldn't force you to do it. Right? I like to have freedom in my approach and freedom in mechanics, not necessarily in what the actual objective to accomplish is.
To second that point about immersive sims, I'd say a lot of immersive sims actually don't have the big open world. and it's more like they set up a playground, a defined playground for you to play with your mini mechanics in. Like Dishonored is a great, well, like almost anything you say about Thief could also be said for Dishonored, of course, because it's like it may not be well known, but it is very much a spiritual successor, and, like intentionally so. And it makes you wonder if almost you wish Arcane had the rights to make a Thief game.
Oh, you do.
Yes, I also do, as it would turn out.
So then, I guess it wouldn't be like linear like that, but like I guess the word I'm looking for instead is like gimmicks, I guess, because like that all those things seem very gimmicky. Where it's like, oh, to do this, like it doesn't matter what you learned beforehand. Like we want you to do it this way. So would you agree that that's more of the thing you don't like about most games where it's like gimmicky stuff?
Yeah, and it's putting it strongly to say that I don't like it. It's it's the problem of there just being so many games to play, and being an adult and not having all the time to game that I used to have. The ones that really, really capture my interest don't really do that. And I do think gimmick is a good word for that particular problem you encountered is just a really good example. Like one that I remember is when I was an undergrad and I was playing through Zelda Wind Waker on my GameCube for the very first time. I'm a big fan of Zelda games, have been. Actually, The Legend of Zelda is on the NES, is the very first video game I actually remember playing. So I'm still a big fan of that series. It has a lot of nostalgia value for me, but I really remember well, pretty early in Wind Waker, there's a forced stealth section where Link gets thrown into this prison cell and you have to sneak by these guys, and it kind of echoes a similar section that was in Ocarina of Time. That one didn't really bug me because it lasted for about 3 screens, but then in Wind Waker they expanded it to this entire dungeon, and I hated it. This is not why I play a Zelda game. And suddenly, you give me all these, you've given me all these tools, I'm aware of the progression. Like, yeah, you get your bow and arrow, you get your hook shot, you get your sword, and then you can go and solve the problems and solve the puzzles and kill the monsters and do whatever you want to do. But now, all of a sudden, all I can do is hide behind these barrels. And if I do anything else, or if I fail at that, I have to start over. It's moments like that that really, really irritate me. Like, I don't quite go full rage mode like Trev did, but I don't like it. Gimmicky is a really, really good word for it, and I think it's generally a terrible design decision.
What's funny about Wind Waker too is that because that's one of my favorite Zelda games, and I can remember at first when I played Wind Waker that I wasn't a giant fan of the stealth part. I was like, oh, this is hard and it's giving me anxiety. Like, I'm sure you probably know the noise that it makes, that the moblin, or not really the moblin makes, but just what happens when you're in the barrel and the moblin sees you moving in the barrel, and it absolutely makes your heart like jump out of your chest. Like, I hated that as a kid, and now the funny thing about it is that like I have it on my Wii U and I play it all the time. And I get through that part and I'm like, this is a cakewalk now because I've played it so many times. But yeah, I get what you mean too, because like that was a part that I don't know, like I would have rather just use my sword and cut through everything, I guess. But sometimes I enjoy like little stealth missions, like what you said about Ocarina of Time. Like it's like a cute little progression and it's not very long.
I'm curious about when, Travis, your sort of self-awareness of immersive sims came about. So I feel like I was liking immersive sims long before I knew like what I liked about them, if that makes sense. Like I knew I liked these games. Like I knew I liked Thief, and I knew I liked Dishonored, and I knew I liked them more than these other set of stealth games. But I was at a real loss to describe what was really going on there. Like, I knew it was something to do with mechanical freedom, but it felt like it was more than that. And I think what it was the emergent gameplay. And it wasn't until I learned about the term immersive sim and started to explore it, and I saw things like System Shock, and I was like, oh, System Shock's also really good. Is that also why I enjoy that? Like, when did because it almost feels like once you learn about the fact that this is a cohesive design philosophy. It's almost like you've discovered this secret world that you always kind of knew about because you were playing the games, but you didn't know that it had a definitive fan base and stuff. When did you find out about immersive sims and discover that the games you liked, that's what they were a part of?
Well, to be honest, I only in terms of articulating it, I only discovered that term in the last couple of years. But like you said, it was kind of retroactive because those were some of the first games that I played that really, really hooked me. I mean, I've been playing games since the NES and I've enjoyed them, but the ones that really, I guess, got their hooks in me that I played over and over and over and over again, the first ones were, Thief and System Shock 2 and Deus Ex, and I didn't really connect all the things that these had in common, except at the time all of the developer overlap that they had, from Origin and Warren Spector through Ken Levine, Looking Glass, Irrational, Ion Storm. I was like, oh, it's all these devs, but it was bigger than that too. I think it was kind of retroactive, and it was actually sequels in those series that were really first illuminating to me. If you've played Deus Ex Invisible War, for example, the forgotten sequel to Deus Ex, I thought it was pretty funny because Tiff is playing Human Revolution on her channel, and she didn't realize that middle game existed. She thought Human Revolution was Deus Ex 2 because Invisible War wasn't even that awful, but it was comparatively so forgettable. And Thief 3 Deadly Shadows isn't nearly as bad as Invisible War, but it suffers from some of the same problems. And it took me a while to figure out exactly what was wrong, because at first I thought it was just because those were some of the very earliest games that were released cross-platform, and so I was used to playing on a PC, but those games were subject to the technical constraints of the original Xbox, and so the levels were a lot smaller, the load times were abysmal, they were awfully optimized. So for a while I thought that was it, but then I slowly kind of pieced together over the years as I played more and more games that that wasn't really what broke them, because I can go back to Thief 3 now and I kind of just have to take a deep breath and accept that the load times are going to happen, but then I can still really enjoy playing it. Whereas Invisible War is probably one of the best examples because it stripped out so many mechanics that were present in the original. Like every single gun in that game uses the same type of ammo. They got rid of skill points, and you just have you can only use 3 or 4 different biomods at a time. And I just remember thinking, why the hell does this game feel like it's a simpler precursor to the game that I loved so much? And what they did in Invisible War, at least, is it took me a while to realize how much choice that they had stripped out. And so then kind of the same thing happened with some of the Elder Scrolls sequels.
Yep. I was literally just
Morrowind was catastrophically hard at the start, just because think back to the Morrowind tutorial. I'm going to defend myself on the mud crab just a little bit, because in the tutorial it says you should learn how to do combat. Pick up this dagger. Here's the button you push to swing it. And I was like, okay, good. I'm going to go swing my dagger and I'm going to go kill the monster. But it's so much more complicated than that, and the game does not tell you.
No,
so you're just sitting there wondering why the hell you're missing. But and you get along to Skyrim, and I'm kind of blown away by the graphics and the narrative and everything that's happening, but I also realize that there's something that I really, really miss, and that's I guess more complex interplay with the different characters and all the different options that you had. And it's that as we've gone on, like I said, there are two sides to that coin, and I think that increased accessibility is, on balance, a good thing. But when sequels to games are stripping out mechanics, it really rubs me the wrong way.
I know exactly what you mean. I also think Skyrim has many praiseworthy qualities, not the least of which is, the great modding community, which we, at least Bethesda deserves partial credit for. But I also feel that way. I feel like there's some taken out character building mechanics that are really important, that, the older games take from their pen and paper ancestors. I think that those were critical. I think there's some important RPG dialogue mechanics that are really stripped down. And then there's other things like you'll recall Daggerfall actually has a wall climbing mechanic, a formal wall climbing mechanic. And I missed that in Skyrim because I think that for things like Thief Guild, that would really open it up to a whole new dimension.
Climbing was a skill in Daggerfall. Like, you'd get halfway up the wall and then suddenly you'd fail your roll and you'd fall down and die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I love that idea, so I definitely feel similarly about those games, even though I do think Skyrim does some things that are, I think they have improved in some way. Obviously the combat is the most obvious thing that, Skyrim combat obviously feels as good as good as any Elder Scrolls game.
I'm assuming you mean non-stealth combat, because that's.
Yes, yeah. Well, there's a whole other thing, of course, Trev, that you're alluding to, which is how viable everything is in Skyrim. I'm not gonna say very early, because there are a couple things that are a bit underpowered early on. But Skyrim goes out of its way to make sure that no matter what you pick, you'll be fine. And not all Elder Scrolls games do that. Oblivion is probably the biggest sinner on that front. As you know, Travis, if you hit level 20 in Oblivion and you don't have the right skills, you're going to stop playing Oblivion forever because it's become impossible.
Yeah, every single rinky-dink bandit is decked out in a full gear Daedric armor.
Yeah.
Once you hit level 20.
Yeah, it's really sad, actually.
Is that like the level?
Yeah, but there's a.
Is that when like the difficulty increases? Is that like the minimum skills, like minimum difficulty, like to meet threshold or something? Or why does it like go to 100? Like
it's a pretty famous problem with Oblivion. It was a good idea, and I think they largely worked out the kinks even by the time their next game, Fallout 3, came out. But Morrowind was pretty heavily criticized, and I think rightly so, for becoming trivially easy. By the time your character hit level 20, no matter what, you would just steamroll through absolutely everything, no matter what skills you had, because the enemies were just so weak, and you could go anywhere at any time, and nothing was gated off. So if you knew what you were doing, you could. Rory is probably going to know what I'm talking about. You can just sprint and get the Daedric Daikatana at the beginning of the game at level 1, and then just steamroll through the rest of the game using just that. And so in Oblivion, they wanted to fix that, and so they made it so that the enemies level up along with you, but it was implemented really, really, really poorly, and basically they had tilted it too far in the other direction. So as you level up in Oblivion, you start to actually feel weaker out in the world unless you have built your character very, very specifically in the right way to tackle the high level enemies. If you haven't min-maxed and you haven't metagamed, you're not going to get anywhere in Oblivion.
Yeah, I actually don't recommend people play Oblivion without a leveling guide.
Okay, sorry guys. One second.
Or a mod.
Thank God I didn't do that, because I remember I bought it and I was like, all right, I'll play this one.
Yeah, Lillian's really on the move out there. No, definitely a guide is critical, I think. I recommend guides for some of them in particular. Skyrim is not necessary. But yeah, so that's another. I guess that's one area, because we talked earlier about increased accessibility to games, and that's definitely one area where it's good that they've changed some things to make it less difficult, because the idea of needing a leveling guide to play a game that is about choice is a bit on the problematic side design-wise, I think. Hey Brago, how are you? One of the things I really want to ask you about, so I mentioned about immersive sims being like this secret world, that once you discover them, like discovering immersive sims, playing the games changed the way I viewed gaming, and then discovering the philosophy formally and learning about it changed the way I viewed games in the future. But I feel kind of the same way about another thing that I know you and I are both passionate about, which is DRM-free gaming. And I'm curious, because this is another secret world of gaming in some ways, that I feel to get to the point where you like DRM free, you have to get to the point where you know what DRM is and you've decided you don't like it. And there's a lot of steps to get there, you know? And most PC gamers I know don't care about DRM unless it's so intrusive that it lowers their frame rate. How do you, at what point did you start to learn about DRM free gaming and start to embrace it as much as you have?
Well, the big turning point for me, and I think it was the same for a lot of people, was the initial release of Diablo 3 in 2012 with the always online requirement. That's when it's, I guess that's the moment when it switched from a mere preference to a moral crusade. But it's just, think, and hell, I'll channel a little bit of my intellectual property attorney background into this answer. Even if it doesn't interfere with my gameplay experience at all, as a philosophical matter, I'm pretty committed to the idea that once I buy something, I should own it.
It seems like a
And I feel like everyone can agree with you.
It's like a pretty basic idea, right?
And I wish there was some waxing poetic that I could do to expand on that answer, but for me it really is that simple. And so if there's a game that I want to play, I always check GOG first, and only if it's not on GOG will I then go to Steam. And you know, Steam's, to be fair, Steam's DRM has really never bothered me. Like, it's never intruded on my gameplay experience in any way. It's never screwed up my frame rate. It's never hurt anything for me. But I also understand those contracts, and technically I don't own the game even though I've paid for it, and that really irks me. And so
that irks me too.
I think that was one of the like more wild things that I realized when I got into PC gaming, because as you know, I'm like just over a year as well as the top 3 of the cast here. Was that like Steam and like other launchers? They're just renting you the stuff. It's like you're just like accessing it remotely, and like they can take it away without like telling you anything. It's like, all right, you don't own it anymore. It's like, what? It's like, I paid for this though. It's like, yeah, but you just paid to use it. Like, it's not like you're actually paying to own it, which is something that's like that's why I'm always like, physical copies are what I buy, but you can't really do that with PC games.
Yeah, it's like that South Park episode, nobody reads. Yeah, it doesn't read.
When I worked at a game store, I can actually remember having to tell somebody who was trading in a PS3, and they had like, I can't remember if, I don't think it was 500 games. I think they were like exaggerating, but they had a lot of games, and they might have said something like $500 worth of games that they had bought digitally on their PS3. And they had asked me, so they're like, okay, so you know, because I went through the process of trading in and everything, and they're like, okay, so what can I do for the digital, for the games that are on the system? And I said, okay, so what do you mean by that? And he goes, well, how much money can I get for the digital games? And I was like, you don't get anything for those. You can't sell those. And he was like, I had to explain it to this guy, and it was so sad. Like, he didn't argue with me or anything, thank God. But he was so upset because he was like, oh my God, I bought so many of those games and I don't get anything back for it. And I was like, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just as a point of clarification, just in case anyone in the chat doesn't keep up with this sort of particular thing. So DRM is digital rights management, and it refers to any and all forms of digital rights management. So if you've got to enter, a product key, something like this, if it, checks to make sure you're the person you say you are, you own the license. Steam period is DRM, basically, a rather advanced and benevolent form of DRM, but Steam, generally speaking, is a form of DRM. And so there's a lot of different DRM-free websites now. It's become more in vogue to make them, but chief amongst them is GOG. Previously stood for Good Old Games. So the way it works, if you buy a game on GOG, you can put that game on a USB drive, give it to your buddy. He can put it on his PC. That's the essential part of DRM-free. You actually own your game. You don't just own a license to use the game. You own the executable, and you can do whatever you so please with it. As you can imagine, it's a bit of a hard sell for some publishers, but I guess like Travis, I think it's in general it's very worthwhile, and it reminds me of the old days of PC gaming, and I think DRM free is one of the strengths of PC gaming now, and being able to I think more and more people are using GOG now for other reasons, because they find that maybe they want to pre-order Cyberpunk, and if you pre-order Cyberpunk on GOG, all your money goes to the CD Projekt Group, which is the parent group of the company that makes The Witcher. And so I think people will come to GOG for other reasons and then stay for the DRM free, at least is my hope. And like yourself, Travis, I'm always I see you on Discord, posting links to GOG sales, and I do the same thing to try to sort of like spread the DRM free philosophy a little bit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's they put in quite a work to get these games to work the way they do. Getting old games to work on modern operating systems is not easy, and GOG has a whole team of people that work on precisely that thing.
But it's wonderful, and it's by far the best service for that. I've had multiple instances where I bought a game on Steam and it just didn't work after I installed it, and I have never had that experience on GOG. No matter what game it is, no matter how old it is, I don't think they put it on until they're sure that it's going to work on modern systems. And that's totally separate from the DRM question, but it's just another reason. Always go to GOG first. Can't say enough good things about that service. Buy your games from GOG if at all possible.
Yeah, I'm also GOG first, but I'm not so hardcore on the DRM free that I won't buy a Steam game. Like if it's only available on Steam, I'm buying it on Steam.
Yeah, me too.
Most people are like, fuck Epic, and I'm assuming Travis, you aren't a fan of Epic.
I'm not a fan of Epic. I haven't made a single purchase, and I don't intend to.
If you would have answered that any other way, I'd just be like, all right, well, I guess we had to end now, because I didn't think this was going to happen this way.
So
don't worry, Trev. I don't like Drake. I don't like Drake or PUBG or The Last of Us either.
That's good that you knew all of those like specific Trev things.
Well, they're like the 4 rules that I completely forgot I had there, and like someone brought it up. I was like, oh shit! I was like, still have those.
Where?
So you you adopted YouTube really early on. Like really early on, because I know a lot of streamers now that are looking into YouTube, and we post this on YouTube, so we're amongst those. We're in the group of people, and as late as I was to the Twitch game, I'm however many years that is plus 10 late to the YouTube game. I'm curious what inspired you to start with YouTube? I know your viewers really enjoy that you do it. Some of them are on time zones such that they can only watch the YouTube videos. And have you found any, like a new community of immersive sim fans on YouTube who then came to Twitch?
Well, I actually started on YouTube before Twitch even existed. I posted my very first YouTube video on December 19th of 2008. And it was and at the time it was just because I was working a night shift at a hospital, and so I had a lot of free time, and so I spent a lot of time on YouTube. And I was back then, believe it or not, there wasn't a whole lot of gaming content on there, because YouTube was founded, I think 2006 is the year that YouTube started, right, full stop. And so by 2008, the big games that everybody was playing you could find on YouTube, but I wanted to find, surprise surprise, Thief content on YouTube, and there was none. And so I thought, oh well, this is something that I can do. And so the very first thing that I ever did that would eventually, over a decade later, lead me into streaming on Twitch was I started uploading just video walkthroughs of Thief onto YouTube. And after Thief, I did Deus Ex, and after Deus Ex, I did System Shock 2. And at first, it was just kind of a passion project to do these favorite games of mine, but I built a following around those games because there was a real community of fans out there who really wanted to see this content. And so I built kind of this little core group really around those 3 games, and then just, okay, what should I play next? Because this is fun, and I have a YouTube channel now. I should keep doing this. And so I kept going with that and got more and more involved. I played through Morrowind. I did a playthrough of Skyrim. I played the Deus Ex sequels. I played the first Bioshock. And so I had a YouTube channel before I ever even started thinking about Twitch. And then I actually started live streaming on YouTube in the winter of 2018. I think it was January or February. And it was really kind of just on a lark because YouTube, I guess they were trying to get a piece of Twitch's market, which they're still trying to do with, I think, very limited success. But but I just noticed one day that there was a go live button. I thought, oh, well, what the hell? Let's try that. And so I started doing. I was playing Fallout New Vegas at the time. I think I was in the middle of the Honest Hearts expansion, actually, and people just started showing up and chatting, and I realized that real-time interaction was something that I really enjoyed, and it was a hell of a lot more fun than going through and answering comments. And even though I had been doing YouTube videos for 10 years, one of the real struggles with doing it in that medium was filling gaps, because you play a game like Fallout or an Elder Scrolls game, there's so much time that you spend doing things like, say, organizing your inventory or just hoofing it from place to place where nothing's really happening. And so I always felt this need to somehow keep up some kind of commentary and just fill that dead air so that it wasn't silent. And live streaming, having a chat, just solved that problem in a heartbeat. I could just interact with people instead of trying to fill all that dead air. Yeah. And so I found that I really enjoyed live streaming, and as soon as I realized what a rinky-dink stream market YouTube was compared to Twitch, so it was more the reverse. It wasn't that people, came from Twitch to YouTube and found that they enjoyed immersive sims. I was able to get a foothold on Twitch relatively fast. I think it took me 2 months after my first Twitch stream to make affiliate, and because I had that existent YouTube community that actually followed me over here and started watching me live, and it's been a really good switch. But I really don't want to abandon the YouTube channel or the people who, like you said, I have a lot of viewers who are all over the world. Like, I've got tons of viewers in Eastern Europe who are really into Thief, and obviously they can't make any of my Twitch streams. So it's been very important to me from the outset to make sure that any content I create here still makes its way over to the YouTube channel.
So
Yeah,
you said you did live streaming from YouTube as well, which was like pretty relatively recent. What's really different? What's been really different to you from like streaming from YouTube and streaming from Twitch? Like, is there? I mean, I know you're on Twitch more often now, but like which do you like? Other aspects better, or like what do you have to say?
No,
about it?
I abandoned YouTube live streaming very quickly because almost nobody. It has almost no audience, and at the time, it didn't even have monetization structure in place. Like, it was brand new, and I barely did any of it. So there's not really anything I miss. Like, if I look back on it now, I sometimes just look at what's going on, and they've since implemented a lot of the same features that Twitch already had at the time. But back then, it was just this really, really skeletal platform, and the biggest problem was it was just unreliable. So I decided really, really early on that I wanted to do my streaming on Twitch, because the YouTube platform on the YouTube side, and I'm sure it's better by now, but I don't really care. But back then, you would get cut off from YouTube's end all the time. Stuff would sputter even though there was nothing wrong with your connection. And it didn't really have a very good or stable platform. So I wanted to come to Twitch. And then, of course, once you make affiliate, you actually sign an exclusivity agreement with Twitch. And so I've just stuck here ever since. So I think the intervening 2, now nearly 3 years, YouTube has improved a lot. But back then, it was just a crummy platform. So
yeah. Starting early on a platform can be a good thing sometimes, because you're one of few. But if there's no monetization in place and it's that skeletal, then it can be a bit rocky. I'm curious actually about like, for me personally, I consider myself to be on the pickier side of gamers, but there are many modern games I get really excited about, and there are even a good few that uphold some of the old sort of design philosophies, whether they be immersive sim or nowadays, old school arena shooters are making a surprising comeback that, to be honest, I never thought they would. What are the modern games that you get excited for? And like, as like an aside to that, have you seen Graven, the new immersive sim, the 3D Realms immersive sim? Have you seen the trailer for this?
Oh.
3D Realms are making an immersive sim called Graven, and there's a trailer on YouTube. Highly recommend that you look into it, because I think you're going to end up really liking it.
I will definitely check it out. So there's something else that I wanted to mention. It doesn't. I don't know if it necessarily ties into the immersive sim question, because there are other types of games that pull this off, but every immersive sim that I have really enjoyed, regardless of what the narrative is or what the specific mechanics are, the kind of games that I always really, really enjoy are the games that manage to make me forget I'm playing a video game. Mm-hmm. And I think that immersive sims are very conducive to that, because they give you all of that freedom. They don't force you into, oh, you're going to do this. Oh, Moblin saw the barrel move, you're done.
Yeah.
They don't have those immersion breaks. And so the modern games that I get the most excited about, I will check out Graven, because I probably honestly get really, really excited at this point about 2 or 3 games per year tops. I think that the genre that's really having a great renaissance right now is horror, and I think that a well-made horror game is really good at precisely that. It can transport you into the world of the game and make you forget that it's a video game, and it can do that in various ways. I mean, I find jump scares to be cheap tricks. They don't really do it for me. Like, I'm really not into, say, Until Dawn is a really good example of something that's just a bunch of jump scares. Like, I thought Amnesia was actually pretty overrated for the same reason. So I'm really excited about Resident Evil 8. I have loved Capcom's recent string of Resident Evil games, really starting with 7, because they pull that off. They allow me to really inhabit the character without ever breaking that immersion for me. And I really, really loved the last game that I really loved was probably Prey in 2017. It did did a lot of all of that. Like it's definitely an immersive sim. It's more like System Shock than Thief, obviously, but it's scary, but not because it's necessarily trying to be a horror game. It's just the environment is legitimately, naturally terrifying. And so, in terms of games that I'm looking forward to right now, I would say, if you want to just go to games that were shown at the PS5 event today, I'm really excited about Resident Evil 8, and it's a completely different direction, but just because I have a sense of how Arcane does things and I have an idea of how it's going to play, I'm really excited about Deathloop. And any game that promises me, I guess, call it a real escape from reality for the duration of my playtime, something that's going to transport me and allow me to inhabit that character as an avatar without reminding me it's a game all the time. Those are the games that I get really excited about.
So, first of all, you're a master of segues, and I definitely I think we should get into the PS5 thing, because it's worth talking about. I also, just as a brief aside, I will say I'm 9 hours into Prey, and I have not finished it, and it's my greatest shame. And Trev brings it up.
I wasn't gonna say anything this time. I really wanted to. When you mentioned it, I was like,
Arcane fan.
I saw Trevor smile when you brought up Prey. So.
I was actually also gonna say too. I'm not. I mean, because this is still a game that would probably remind you that it is a game. But like talking about horror games, because I'm not much of a horror game person at all. But like I agree. Like I think the reason why I'm not really much into horror games is because quite a few of them are just like, okay, where can we put a really well placed jump scare? You know. And I hardly ever play horror games, but one of the ones that I really liked that I played last year was Little Nightmares, because it didn't necessarily have a lot of jump scares. It was like maybe 3 or 4 big ones that would just kind of freak you out at first. But one of the things that I love watching scary games is the thing. I don't play them much, but I watch them. And I always find that the ones that I enjoy the most are not necessarily the ones that like, oh, here's a jump scare, watch out for the jump scares. But they make you worry, like they make you feel like this is really freaky. And one of the things that I loved about Little Nightmares is that you just be in this like dank, freaky, creepy room with like music box music playing, and you're like, this is just plain freaky, Or like Alien. I mean, I didn't play Alien Isolation, but like you never know where that alien is going to be, and it just freaks you out, So it's not just
atmosphere is
not just like it's not just like jump scares, It's like it makes you feel something, and I mean, I'm excited for Little Nightmares too. But I don't know if you've ever played the first Little Nightmares, but I definitely recommend it if you haven't.
That sounds wonderful, and we'll check it out. But I'm really into horror as a medium. This is a little bit off topic for here, but I'm really into horror movies and even novels and stories as well. Just what can and can't successfully elicit a fear response is something that's fascinating to me. Now, I can't remember who said this, but they were talking about the difference between dread and horror, and dread is the thing that I like to experience in a game, and they summed it up as dread is the experience of being 7 steps away from something horrifying. Dread is the moment when you notice that a window that should be closed is open. That and I think that games are actually a really, really unique position to take advantage of that. And I hate that there are so many shitty horror games. Like when I saw the Five Nights at Freddy's trailer, I just rolled my eyes. I was like, oh god, another one of these. But the another thing I guess I'm really passionate about is I believe that when they're done properly, the video games really can be an art form, and I think that they're at their strongest when they attempt to accomplish things that aren't possible in other media, because I don't really want to start a Kojima debate here, but I think it's pretty abundantly clear that at least half of Kojima just wishes he was a filmmaker. You know?
Yeah, I would say he's fairly upfront about that, actually. I don't even think that's a controversial... I think he might agree with you.
There's a whole movie at the end of Metal Gear Solid 4.
Metal Gear Solid 4, yeah.
The whole ass movie.
And Death Stranding as well.
And so there are, immersive sims and emergent gameplay. That's something that can't happen in any other medium, right?
Yes,
it's
I agree.
So dependent on what the player does, and I think good horror is the same way. It's just video games to me are at their absolute strongest when they take advantage of the fact that the player is a participant. In terms of mechanics, in terms of narrative, whenever they channel that interactivity into what it is they're trying to do, that's when they're at their best for me. So this isn't going to surprise anybody but I think the greatest horror game ever made is Silent Hill 2. And it's...
Silent Hill is amazing, by the way.
We were just talking about this too, because I'm sure watching the PS5 event, you were probably so disappointed that there was no Silent Hill.
He was in Tiff's Discord. He was like, I want Silent Hill, another one.
And the thing that's weird to say about Silent Hill 2 is I've played it bunches of times. Silent Hill 2 is not fun to play. Like, you start up a game of Silent Hill 2, you are not signing on for a pleasant experience. Like, even when you know the storyline and you know what's going to happen, you're signing up to just be, like, emotionally gut-punched every time. And even the mechanics aren't exactly fun either. Like, everything about the game just channels this sense of awful oppression and this horrible, horrible atmosphere of guilt and shame and suffering, but it just channels it so well because it takes the fact that you identify with your protagonist, the character you're playing as, and uses that against you to manipulate your emotions in a way that I don't think any other medium can replicate. And it's true in more positive games as well, but anything that really seizes on the interactivity of the medium and either makes it part of the narrative or part of the mechanics, or in my absolute favorite video games, usually both, I think that's when gaming's at its strongest.
I agree. I think this is actually something that I'm glad we've gotten the chance to talk to both you and Walt, because one of the things Walt made a point to say is that gaming isn't better because it's more like a movie. Like, the games that are more like movies aren't necessarily better for it. I actually think, speaking about, well, horror games and broadly speaking atmosphere, because I wanted to transition to talking about this game, which has a controversial standing in the immersive sim community, insofar as it's, a lot of people would argue it's not an immersive sim at all.
Before you transition, a quick question for Travis. Have you played what is it called? Hellblade or Plague's Tale? Because I heard those are really, like, well, I've never played either one of them, but from what I've been told, I've heard those are more like Hellblade specifically is like a really, like, immersive game, and like the way that it plays, and because it's all based on psychosis, so it's like really they like brought in people who like study psychosis and stuff. So I know that's really, like, immersive happy.
No, I haven't played either one. I know hardly anything about A Plague's Tale. The closest I've come to Hellblade is I saw parts of it when Tiff was streaming it, and it definitely looked intriguing to me. Like, it looked like the kind of game that I would enjoy. Sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting, like what Trev said about the way that they learned about psychosis, because they got actual, like, psychologists to come in and, like, talk to them so they could make this game, which is really interesting. Oh, Eric, that's do you mean like you need to play it with headphones like Hellblade or Plague Tale?
I think he means Hellblade, probably.
Okay, because I was gonna say I think they even say that. Okay.
I think it is actually at the beginning of the game. It is a really good
I'm
game,
pretty sure
actually.
they tell you too. I love Plague Tale, so that one's actually a favorite of mine that I always recommend whenever it's on sale, like on Steam and stuff. The big gist of it is just that, like, it takes place around, like, the 1340s in France around the bubonic plague, and it's a really good game. It was longer than I expected, and I super loved it. It was really good. So if you ever find it, because it's on PC, it's on Steam. If you ever see, like, especially see it on a sale, I would pick it up because it is really cool. Outlast 3.
Well, yeah, the thing
They are making an Outlast 3, Brago. I think it's not called Outlast 3. It's called like the Outlast Trials or something. But there's a third Outlast game coming out. There's already a trailer for it.
The thing I was going to ask you about was about BioShock, because I think it articulates two important points. One of which is you don't have to be a horror game to get a sense of dread, because the first time you play BioShock, before you know like what the overpowered skills are, i.e. the wrench, you
Zap them, then whack them.
You feel very underpowered, right? Like in this new world. And I also think it articulates something else special about games, which is that not only are games not necessarily better for being more like movies, but games aren't necessarily better for being more realistic. Because people may think that, oh, I need to be immersed in something that looks like my real world to feel dread and to feel like it's actually real. But that's not true at all. And I think that BioShock proves that, because Rapture doesn't look anything like most people's real world. At least none of the people I've met. And you still feel, I still think, as much as I actually would not call it an immersive sim, I do think you feel immersed. And I'm curious about your opinions on BioShock, especially as someone else who's played System Shock.
Yeah, well, it's no secret that I adore BioShock, and I don't want to. I realize it's how old? 12 years old now. Came out in 2008, but I realize there might be people watching who haven't played it, and so I don't want to actually spoil the story twist. But for me, the oh shit moment in that game works on so many levels, and I think that BioShock's big twist, more than anything else, at least lands to me, not so much the first time I played it, but in subsequent plays as I've gotten older and thought more about narrative in any medium, but particularly in games. It's a commentary on how players interact with games, right? And I think it's just fascinating. And to your point about the actual mechanics, horror, I mean, BioShock is really, really scary, and it's really unsettling, and the atmosphere is really oppressive, and it pulls it off in ways that are just such a radical departure from what you would think of as horror. If I describe that scene in Fort Frolic to you, you know the one I'm talking about with Sander Cohen, and the Nutcracker March waltz playing, like, that doesn't sound like a horrifying experience, and it's not, and maybe scary isn't even really the right word for it, but when that moment lands, it's just, to your point, it's so far removed from any kind of reality that you would experience as a human being, and yet I play it, I'm completely immersed in it. It feels so real, despite being so unbelievable in all of its particulars.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the oh shit moment in BioShock, which we're really gonna dance around this because it's really important if you haven't played it that you experience that, because it's good, is one of the best retrospective storytelling moments I've seen in any medium, and that goes for movies, books, anything. It's just incredible. There's actually a really underrated one in Lost. Actually, I don't know if you've seen the TV series Lost.
I haven't.
I don't want to spoil it, but there's a small thing in that where it's like, it's very similar actually in the structure to BioShock. How do you feel about BioShock as a spiritual successor to System Shock?
I thought it was fantastic. I think that I thought that it, other than I guess palette swapping Citadel Station or Von Braun for Rapture, I felt like I was playing a System Shock game. I mean, full stop. And it's no surprise. It was Ken Levine's second game, and it was supposed to be System Shock 3. They just couldn't get the rights from EA, and so they had to switch the IP. So I mean, it's very, very clear to anyone who's played System Shock that you call it a spiritual successor, and I think that's accurate, but it almost sounds too far removed. Like,
yeah,
it is a System Shock game. Like, the design philosophy is identical. Everything that Ken wanted to achieve in BioShock was simply a refinement of what he did in System Shock 2. So I think it slots in perfectly. It was a fantastic spiritual successor.
I agree. I'm very nervous about the next BioShock entry.
BioShock without Levine, yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Are they making? Have they announced they're making another one? Huh.
Yep, they are definitely doing another BioShock game. Yeah, I'm nervous. I actually have, even though I love Infinite and I think it's a special game, and I think it's special in its genre of first-person shooters, I have to say that as a BioShock game, I think it has a conflicted identity.
I agree with that. It tilted pretty hard toward being a shooter. Instead, it had significant departures from the design ethos of Shock 1, Shock 2, and BioShock.
Yeah,
I thought it was narratively brilliant, and I absolutely adored it for that. But
I agree. I think it's his best straight. I think, however, that what you talked about, dread, I never once felt powerless in BioShock Infinite.
Mm-hmm.
I never once felt like, because I can, insofar as I can aim and shoot, I felt, as powerful as you could be in that world, because I felt that the only thing this world depended on was my ability to aim and shoot. Whereas in BioShock 1, I actually think one of the underrated things about that is the skill building. Like, I think skill building in that game is really important. Playing through BioShock and discovering different builds, I think, was, I guess...
I had a better time with Infinite on 1999 mode, if you haven't tried it. Your gear selection becomes pretty important there, but...
I haven't tried it, and I've heard the same thing. You mentioned the essential quality of an immersive sim earlier, and I agree with you 1000%. Emergent gameplay. I think it's got to be the one thing that identifies it above other things. But I also think that one of the underrated positive side effects to that is replayability, because there's so much emergent gameplay that you and I can both play Thief or both play Dishonored and have effectively completely different experiences. And then do it again and have effectively completely, like, we could just keep going, and I feel like we could do this a number of times and never cover the full subset of what is actually possible in one of these games. And I guess that's what keeps, at least for me, that's what keeps me coming back to playing them, is just
one thing I like about Dishonored a lot. I thought when achievements were very first becoming a thing, I think it was on the Xbox 360, right? That achievements were born at the start of that generation. I thought they were silly and stupid, and Xbox 360. I kind of changed my mind actually when I played Dishonored. And the thing that I think is really neat about the different achievements that are in that game is the way it encourages not just replays, but replays that are going to feel completely different, right? Yeah. There's an achievement for getting every single power maxed out, and then there's an achievement for killing everybody, and then there's an achievement for not killing anybody, and then there's an achievement for not taking any upgrades, mostly flesh and steel. So that's the game kind of, without being really handholdy, just sort of signposting to you, here are at least 4 completely different experiences you can have playing this same game. Because to get back to Thief for a second, one thing, Thief is way too old to have achievements or anything like that, but one thing that was neat about it was it developed this really, really solid core community of fans who, they kept releasing fan missions for it. They're still releasing fan missions for the original Thief to this day. And they came up with all of these different challenge modes that you could just go back and play. And, the game didn't register whether or not you had successfully done it or not. But, my favorite challenge mode is something that the community named ghosting, which is where you don't take out any of the enemies and you never get spotted and still manage to steal all the loot. And it's just, I think, to your point in trying to define an immersive sim.
Hands, which is what I tried to get Rory to do the first time. I didn't know anything about the game, but I was like, you should do a clean hands run.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is, and I think it was cool that Dishonored formalized it and put in a mechanism to recognize it, even if it is just a quote-unquote meaningless achievement that it awards you at the end. But the ability to, within the constraints of the same game, as you put it, the same playground, have these wildly varied experiences depending on what you set out to do. I think that's quintessential, and it's one of the things, and it's probably the main thing that I love about them.
Well, and it still lets you write your own rule sets on top of that,
Yeah, because to your point about replayability and the gap between Infinite and the other Shock games, I've played System Shock 2 dozens of times. I've played BioShock at least 5 times. I played Infinite once.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very, very similar to me as well. Actually, I just felt like, okay, that was complete now. It was almost like I was done, and that made me a bit sad, actually. Even though like you say, the game is narratively brilliant. And I agree, actually. I think that the developers of Dishonored were very smart in that in the first game, as you'll recall, the achievement is for purchase no powers except Blink, because you actually need Blink to finish the game. You can't finish the game without using Blink at least one.
Right.
I can only think of one persistent instance. But in the second game, they fixed that. They were like, okay, we made it possible so you could definitely finish it without powers. Speaking of Arcane, we're both fans, of course, and we're both very excited, I think, for Deathloop. I would say that that's safe to say. And there was some Deathloop shown today. What are your thoughts on the showcase? And for the whole floor, then I want to know what everybody's favorite game was from the PS5 showcase.
Well, I mean, I'll just leave aside the fact that there's no Silent Hill. That was disappointing. But I thought, I mean, it's a showcase. You're never going to see a whole lot of anything, and it's funny to see the different things people get excited about. I think it's just a matter of taste, because I thought it looked really nice, but I have no interest in Spider-Man, Miles Morales. Whereas a bunch of people in Discord were just all agog over that one. I thought that the games that I'm excited about out of the showcase, and I think I already said this, but I'm excited about Resident Evil 8. I thought it was a good bit of fan service to have a merchant thrown in at the end, even if he didn't have the iconic Resident Evil 4 merchant voice. I was really hoping for a "What are you playing?" But
yeah.
But I thought that was great, and I think the game looks unsettling. It looks like it's definitely trying to channel Resident Evil 4, but really modernize it. And I think that with the run Capcom's been on lately, I think it's going to be great. I think Resident Evil 3 was probably not necessarily a misstep, but it wasn't really, really great like 7 and the remake of 2 were, because playing Resident Evil 7, it is in the same universe. It's a numbered sequel. It's part of the main series, but playing that, more than anything, it feels to me like I'm playing a spiritual sequel to the original Resident Evil, because it was exactly the same concept. You were tossed into this mansion, terribly vulnerable, all on your own, and then Resident Evil 2 was a direct remake, but it felt like Resident Evil 2, and it feels like what they're going for with Resident Evil 8 is that sort of feeling of Resident Evil 4 pulled into the modern era, and I really, really hope they pull it off, and I'm really excited for that, just because I loved 7 and 2. I thought they were both pretty close to flawlessly executed as survival horror games go. I'm also, of course, really excited for Deathloop. It's never really occurred to me to have... I guess Dishonored was, in some respects, an assassination game, and I'm curious to see what Deathloop is going to turn out to play like, because obviously the plot revolves around eliminating the targets in a certain amount of time, and all the gameplay that we've seen has been, it's comparatively action-heavy, but I have to believe that being an Arcane game, there's going to be more to it than that, because it looks like really, really fun gunplay, but that's kind of all they've shown so far, with some neat teleportation powers a la Dishonored. So I'm hoping that it's a little bit of just, call it successful marketing, because the thing about immersive sims that Rory and I probably know all too well is that they don't tend to sell that well, and they're a very, very difficult sort of game to market, and they have an unfortunate tendency to be studio killers.
Yeah.
Whereas, but Arcane has miraculously done really well with Dishonored games and Prey, to their credit so far. So I'm really excited about Deathloop, mostly at this point just because of who the developers are, because what I've seen doesn't show me a whole lot of what I'm really interested in. But I have to believe there's going to be elements of that, and I default back actually to the way that Dishonored was marketed, because if you go back and look at the Dishonored trailers, they were actually the same way. All of those trailers just showed like really action heavy Corvo killing things, and
that's absolutely true. Yeah,
so much more meat to the game than that. So I strongly suspect that's what's going on. So even though nothing that I actually saw in the showcase was really exciting to me, I'm excited about those two games.
So
Really
if it's
good
any
point,
consolation, go ahead, Morgan.
Oh, just that was kind of a good point too, because you said that in the trailers for Dishonored, they showed so much of Corvo like going around and just like killing and like that. But you said that there was so much more to the game than that, and that's actually a really good way of doing trailers too, because if they show everything, then you know everything, and you're not really like, you're just like you're playing the game and you just kind of go, okay, well, I saw that in the trailer, I saw this in the trailer, cool, I saw this in the trailer, I get to do that now. But instead it's like, ooh, this is new.
If there are surprises along the way, it's more entertaining and like, I guess, fun for the fans than it is if you see everything and then it's like, all right, well, I saw this happen, this happened, this happened, this happened.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the populace would also be kind of bored by me and Travis's ideal immersive sim trailer. You know what I mean? Like, I feel there's a balance. But if it makes you feel any better, Travis, there are a couple things that I noticed in the Deathloop trailer. One of which is it was hinted at that the order you complete the objectives affects the target's behavior. He does something in there, which he says then causes this target to move closer to this other target. And I'm hoping there's a lot of play in that emergent NPC behavior. The other thing I noticed is that, much like Blink, I don't believe this is a straight teleport. So the way Blink works in Dishonored, if you don't know, is you don't teleport from point A to point B, you travel from point A to point B really fast. So if there's anything in your way, like a guard, you will collide with the guard still. Which can lead to some interesting physics and some interesting bouncing. And if you've played Thief 1, you know all about moving fast and bouncing. Because there's a lot of that. And
good old bunny hop glitch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a classic part of only the original Thief. But this, it looks like this is the same way. I noticed a part where he appeared to blink at a guard and collided with the guard. So I'm hoping that will lead to some interesting physics that we can play off of. But I was looking out for that stuff. I was like Morgan was watching it with me. Like I was like, as soon as Deathloop started, like,
I saw Deathloop and I was like, oh look.
Oh yeah. Here we go.
That was probably the best part of the PlayStation 5 reveal at all, because like Rory was like, because all of us were talking to each other and we were like, okay, what does everybody want to see? And Rory was like, I want to see Deathloop, but they're not going to show Deathloop. And then what did they show? Deathloop.
Yeah, I was blown away, to be honest, at how much they've embraced Deathloop as a part of their like lineup. Like, credit to them. I mean, you know, I mean,
He's not going to buy it on the PlayStation 5.
Grateful. I mean, I'm going to buy it on the PC, of course, but they like it's a nice sentiment.
I think I do think Arcane has a bit of credibility at this point, and I don't know if you've played it or not, but Prey itself didn't sell all that well, at least initially, but the Moon Crash DLC was actually really, really well received, and I haven't streamed it, I've thought about it, but I will tell you it's a lot of fun, and it's a really cool idea, and it sounds kind of like it might be, just in terms of design ethos, expanding on that for Deathloop, because the Moon Crash DLC for Prey, it's, you know, the exact same core game mechanics, but it's basically just like a roguelike, where you go into this situation and your objective is just to survive and escape, and the particulars regenerate every time, so you can't just learn the level, you can't figure out where the vent is or where you're going to find the right code or where this gun is hidden, because you have to play it differently every time. But it was really well received, and it really buoyed Prey's sales. And when I think about, okay, I guess the regeneration in this very tight environment on the one hand, but it plays out differently every time, I think they really sort of distilled that, and almost they basically made a roguelike immersive sim for the DLC to Prey, and it works really, really, really well. And when I think about what you're talking about with Deathloop, like, the targets behave differently depending on what I do first, and every single attempt is going to play out differently. It sounds like maybe they're expanding on that, and they found, but the point of marketing and it being featured, they found a good deal of financial success with that, even compared to the base game, which it's pretty hard to, I think, to boost a game's sales based on a DLC, but from the reports I heard, Moon Crash pulled that off.
That's terrific to hear. And of course, Dishonored did do well. Like, commercially, it was very well received. Even if you didn't engage with the immersive sim-ness of it, like, even if you just played it like just totally straight, you know, like, I still think you could have a lot of fun with it, which is good. Melly, what was I suspect I know what your number one thing from the PS5 showcase is, but I want to know if I'm right.
My number one thing?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I saw a lot of, I don't know if I have like a number one, but there was a lot that I was excited about. Like, obviously I was excited about seeing anything Final Fantasy. Not like, obviously I was one of my favorite games this year was Final Fantasy VII Remake. I know that this is not part 2 of that, but it was still exciting to see like a fully fleshed out like trailer of 16. I was actually also really excited about Resident Evil 8. I think all of Tarvis's analysis of what has made the later Resident Evil games so compelling. I think I'm like right on the same page with you, where I'm like excited to see, because like Resident Evil 4. I enjoyed Resident Evil 4. It's not one of my favorites, so I'm actually really excited to see what they do with it, remixing it for like modern time. I'm kind of like bringing some of the sensibility of that into an 8th Resident Evil game, so that actually excited me a lot.
I suspected it was Resident Evil. That was going to be my guess. For your favorite thing. But yeah, you have embraced Final Fantasy, and that's good to see, because that's you know, you're a newcomer to Final Fantasy. Right?
Yeah. So now anything new Final Fantasy, I'm going to be very intrigued about. So.
One of the hardest games that I have ever finished, and I did finish it, is Final Fantasy 1 on the Nintendo Entertainment System.
That's what a lot of fans have said, that like, if like, I mean, like, obviously, like, I'm not saying that like, oh, you're not a real fan unless you do this and this, but like, I've heard a lot of Final Fantasy fans say like, yeah, that like getting into some of the older ones and actually beating them are brutal.
but I knew it was FF16 as soon as the original, like, the song is even called Final Fantasy. As soon as that queued up, I was like, oh, here we go. Kick in the nostalgia.
Rory can even say, like, I heard that music and I was, because I knew it was Square Enix, and I was like, okay, well, this is definitely Final Fantasy, but in case it isn't, because they do have that look sometimes. But as soon as the music started going, I was like, yeah, no, this is Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Final
No,
Fantasy.
it's exactly. You knew it right away.
I'm going to be really excited to watch. I mean, I don't know if Melly will stream it or not, depending on when it comes out, I suppose. But, like, I'll be excited just to hear her talk about it, just because it'll be interesting. I mean, because you played Final Fantasy VII Remake, which, like, you had at least, like, you know, known who the characters were. You know, like, Cloud, like, and Tifa. I think you at least kind of knew who they were. So, like, it'll be
like
really
everyone
cool.
knows those characters specifically.
I mean, like, at least Cloud, like,
Yeah,
for sure.
Sephiroth.
Like, it's just, like, Sephiroth even.
Sephiroth.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
but I'm really excited to see, like, you really get into, like, a brand new Final Fantasy right in the beginning. Like, because I think you'll think they're really neat. And I'm really excited for that one, too. I think it's really cool looking.
Now,
Trev, is it Devil May Cry 5 or is it Demon Souls?
literally, yeah.
It's not. So it's not either one of those actually.
Oh.
I knew Devil May Cry 5 was getting a special edition for a while, so I knew that was gonna be. I didn't know when it was gonna announce, but I knew it was coming. And then after seeing Demon Souls, like, I'm hyped for that game still, but like knowing it's the like predecessor to all the games I enjoy now. Well, I wouldn't say enjoy because it depends how well I'm doing.
I thought you were the
But,
best at every game you played.
I am, but like sometimes the game, you know, glitches and like I just get fucked and then it's fine. But it looked a lot slower, which is like not something I enjoy. I like super fast-paced action as opposed to like swing in like two seconds it like happens. Like I want swing and happen in 1 second and like not just like slow, drawn out. But the thing that was like the most exciting for me actually was the teaser at the end, the very last thing they showed, which was the God of War Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Rory and I talked about it too, because I knew it was God of War. Like, because at first Rory and I were saying it started doing like it almost looked like a ring, and we were like, "Is this Elden Ring maybe?" But then it went around, and
Circle back around, yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, it's God of War." And then I realized after it was over, because all they said was Ragnarok is coming, and then I looked at Rory and I was like, "Okay, I understand that we're all gamers here, and that somebody who sees that is gonna know that it's God of War, but they didn't actually say God of War. They didn't say
They
it
just
was
showed the
God of
icon
War
and had
anywhere.
him speak, and then they're like, "All right."
They just showed the sigil, and that was it.
Yeah. And I remember
But
saying
that
to
was
Morgan,
pretty
I was
good.
like, I guess every Norse thing has an obligation to do a Ragnarok story now. Like, there's no, like if you're going to set your thing in, like, a Norse god universe, you just have to do that. But yeah, I know
Well,
you really...
and they did directly tease it at the end of the last game.
Yeah.
And I know you know, Trev really enjoyed the first one. And, so is that... Yeah, so that's your number one. Okay, yeah. I guess when you knew about DMC...
I think that was just because everything else was kind of already like shown before. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like this was the first new thing they announced. Like I've seen Miles Morales at the Game Awards. I've seen Demon's Souls announced before. I've seen everything else they announced here except for Final Fantasy. But
Yeah. I actually think, well, it's DMC is in a bit of a troubled state with me at the moment, as Morgan knows, because I was talking about it earlier, where I have DMC 5 as the first one to release simultaneously on PC, so I have it on PC, but this one coming to PC is not maybe at launch, and that upsets me, because I think if you're going to release something like that, you know, it would be nice if you released it on all the platforms
they
that
did do it for
at launch.
the base game, so maybe.
Yeah, that's the hope. Yeah, but they haven't confirmed. So
Well,
it makes me
did
nervous.
4? I know we made an entire video series on this, but did 4 actually come out at the same time?
I want to reiterate, we literally just finished making a video series on DMC, so we should know. But yes, actually, I do think that was simul-released, because that was 2015.
So then I assume that it'll follow the same.
I mean, it should. I mean, if it doesn't, I'll be very, very sad.
Yeah,
You can find you can find a link to our YouTube channel there, where you can find all the VODs of the podcast and stuff like that. Now, Morgan, what was your number one thing from the PS5 conference?
So I'm actually gonna do a 2 thing, because like Trev kind of made a good point about like what hasn't been shown. So I would say it would be Miles Morales, because Spider-Man was my favorite game of 2018. I have the collector's edition, and I even have
I do too.
I think you guys can kind of see it here. It's right there. That's where the statue is. And
there, next to the lampshade. That's forever equipment.
And I just absolutely loved it. I don't want to say too much, because Rory still hasn't played it and has still managed to not get any spoilers. I don't know how he does it. He's very good at it. But I loved it. It made me feel so many things, and like the platinum was fairly easy, because there weren't too many things you really had to jump through holes to
It took
get
me
to.
like 20 hours. So I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. So it wasn't difficult at all, but it had been kind of a long time where I had played a game and just fully had all fun for everything. Like all of the boss battles, I never got frustrated, and it was just plain old fun for me. Like it kind of felt like how I felt playing like Legend of Zelda games, where I was like, this is cool, I love this, but it was my favorite game of 2018. So Rory can definitely tell you guys, because he saw me fangirling over Miles Morales.
It was adorable
today, because I was just staring at it like, I'm so excited for this, and I hope they do a collector's edition, because I will get it. But I love the gameplay, and I love the storyline. I love the way that it looks, and so I'm super excited for that one. And so I would say Miles Morales, but it has already been shown before. We just got to see gameplay today. So the other one I would say would definitely be Final Fantasy 16, because the fact that it kind of goes back a little bit, considering that Final Fantasy 7, obviously has like, it's a bit more like industrialized, and Final Fantasy 15, you can drive
like present day. Yeah, you were driving
you
like
can drive cars and stuff.
And
Like, I mean, it was cool considering the way that they did it was like, there was still like monarchy type thing, but it was modern. But this one said that it takes place in like the late 1800s, so I'm excited
looked very
to see.
Witcher-esque, and I was like, oh,
Yes.
I was like, this is a good direction.
I'm very excited to see what the storyline will be like. The graphics were beautiful, and the music, it's some Square Enix, even though like some of their practices lately have been a bit weird. I do love their visuals, their storylines, and their music usually are some of my absolute favorite things in video games. So I'm very, very, very excited for Final Fantasy 16. I hope they do some kind of a collector's edition that's not going to be some weird thing where it's a deluxe edition and a Bring Arts figure that's like $400. I hope it's an actual collector's edition.
Collector's edition.
But yeah.
One thing I'm curious about with Final Fantasy 16, since you mentioned the narrative and we talked some about older Final Fantasies, when that text popped up about, I'm gonna misquote it, but it was something like the legacy of the crystals will no longer define our history, or something like that.
Yeah.
That seemed like a really, really meta narrative moment about the series to me, because each of the first 5 games revolved around finding the 4 elemental crystals, and then 6 and 7, I think 6 through 10 kind of got away from that, and then they went back to it a little bit for some of the teenage numbered sequels. So I'm really curious if Square Enix is about to do something like really, really bold with their storyline to kind of take it in a new direction, and that tagline is their first hint to us that they're doing that. But that aspect of it is pretty exciting to me. I really want to see what they do with the narrative, because that's always been the focal point of Final Fantasy games, that even ones that gameplay wise I haven't particularly enjoyed, of which there are several. So
in me and Trev's case, so I'm not a big Final Fantasy guy, truth be told. I like 7 back in the day, and I thought that was cool. That was on PC, and I thought it was badass, and it came in 1,000,000 discs, and there was a lot to it. But I haven't embraced any of the Final Fantasies. I haven't played 15. I haven't played 7 Remake or any of the other ones in between. Like Final Fantasy 7 is my sole Final Fantasy experience. But there's as Trev pointed this out to me. I wouldn't have known about it if it weren't for him. The like battle director from DMC is working on Final Fantasy 16, and that very much excites me
And
just from a mechanical standpoint.
The Monster Hunter guy. So I don't know if those are the same people or if they're 2 different people, but those 2 people are working on it.
That would be huge.
That's funny. I have played 1 through 10 to completion, and I've played none of the ones after 10.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah. I didn't know you had delved into it that much. Actually, I knew you were a Final Fantasy 7 fan, but I didn't know you were that experienced in the in the franchise. Actually,
15's interesting. It's interesting. 12 is actually really neat. If I can be honest, it gets a tiny bit frustrating at times. But I liked it quite a bit, and I loved 15. 15 was really good, and I'm actually really excited. Either to watch Melly or to just talk to her about it, which actually, now that I think about it, I should also mention one of the reasons why, this is going to seem almost a little bit off topic now, but one of the reasons why I love Spider-Man so much is because Spider-Man is actually one of the things that really helped Melly and I really bond with each other, because we kept talking to each other about Spider-Man whenever we got to new parts. And so that's also one of the reasons why I loved Spider-Man so much. Because it just makes me think of Mel.
I really need to play that.
Oh.
And that's an adorable story. So it's getting late now, and we're going to be winding down the podcast. First and foremost, Travis, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a real pleasure.
To have
Thank you.
And we're going to.
Coming, but
yeah, it really has been a long time coming. Yeah, Travis also one of the first streams on Twitch I became aware of, because the very first stream was Tiff's, and then Travis was always in Tiff's chat, and so it was a very short journey there.
Everything is connected.
Although me and Travis didn't get to sort of form a camaraderie around our tastes until later, when it turns out I don't know how we found out, Travis, that we liked a lot of the same games, but somehow it got brought up in some fashion or another. And we actually share a regular or 2 in our streams, actually.
Ancient history now, but
yeah.
It was serendipitous.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming by and hanging out with us and just chatting with us. We're going to be sending you over to somebody. Travis, if you have someone in mind, you can feel free to DM us in the group chat.
Just throw it in the group chat.
Oh, that's not necessary. I've had my follow list pulled up the whole time since you warned me, and right now we should just raid Megan.
Okay, yeah.
Nobody else that I closely follow is even on right now. So
okay, yeah. Is Megan still on? Megan's still on.
Megan
right?
is still on.
Yep. Okay, excellent. All right.
She's awesome. She's playing the Frozen Wilds DLC for Horizon Zero Dawn, which is also a game that's coming to PlayStation.
Damn, that was fast.
So, for those who don't know Megan, she's on the True Variety stream team, which this podcast is also a part of. Really wonderful variety streamer, and I've not played Horizon Zero Dawn, but everyone mostly says it's terrific, and I have one friend who's like a super hardcore fan of it. So
when he says mostly,
I think you'll all...
I tell him don't play it.
I wasn't gonna call you out. I was gonna leave that anonymous.
No, I love telling people that because it's
but yeah, I think you guys will really enjoy it. So let's head on over and say hi to Megan. Our raid command is streamers become raiders. For the artistically inclined, you can do a /me in front of streamers become raiders, and the message will appear in the same font color as your username.
Oh yeah, and then one quick thing.
Yeah, what's
Since
up?
you do law practice, you probably didn't read the contract for signing on to this, but we can call on to you anytime further in the future to reappear, and you have to by law come back on this cast.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
You won't have to subpoena me. I'll come willingly.
Oh, okay. All right. All right, but yeah, well, gonna send you guys over to Megan, and
We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks very much.
All right, it went through, right?
Yeah.